Well, both Lori Vallow and Casey Anthony have been accused of killing their children. Now, Lori Vallow was convicted of this crime this past Friday. Casey was acquitted. Yet Casey Anthony is still considered to be the most hated mom in history. Lori is tied to the death of 4 people, including 2 of her children. Casey tied to only 1. So my question is, why is Casey Anthony considered by most people to be the most hated mom in America? Well, we're going to talk about that and more on this episode of Charlie Crime Buster. Yep, what some people are calling the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those solely of individuals interviewed and participating in this show and do not represent those of Peacemaker Network and Charlie Crime Buster. All individuals described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to this edition of Charlie Crime Buster. Well, by now you know that Lori Vallow Daybell was convicted of conspiracy and murder of her children. That was this past Friday. Now, this came upon us, well, to our surprise, I must say that the defense rested its case almost as soon as the defense time came to present their case. You see, they kind of went on the premise that the state did not prove their case without a shadow of a doubt. Well, they were wrong. But then they went into closing statements, and bang, in week 5, or 6, if you count the week to pick the jury, well, the trial is over, and Lori Vallow is convicted. Murder. Well, she actually was convicted on all counts that was brought before the court. But I want to talk to you today about the similarities of this case and another case, the case of Casey Anthony. But first, let me welcome you to the podcast. We appreciate all of our first-time listeners, especially. It's always good to know that every week we have more and more people listening to Charlie Crime Buster. And we invite all of you to reach out with a shout-out. You can reach me at charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. And as I say on every podcast just about, you can email us with your suggestions on cases to cover. You can ask questions about cases we have covered. You can even disagree, and you can have a safe place to voice your disagreement. We'd love to hear from you. charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. We also invite you to go to Charlie Crime Buster on Facebook. Like the page. Become a part of the Crime Buster family. We'd love to hear from you on Facebook as well. Now, something else interesting about this today. It is that we're releasing our episode on Sunday. That's right. And this particular episode is released on Mother's Day. Now, I think we all will agree that neither of these mothers, Lori Vallow or Casey Anthony, will ever get Mother of the Year. But, my friend, there are millions and millions of wonderful, caring moms out there that deserve our praise. So, Charlie Crime Buster, on this Mother's Day, well, we'd like to take a moment to salute all the wonderful moms out there. You see, no one is loved as much as a mom. I can remember as a teenager growing up watching football on TV. And when the cameras would switch to the sideline to focus on a big, tough, big football player, well, when they noticed they were on camera, almost to a man, you would see them mouth out, "Hi, Mom." That's right. They always respected their mother. Well, unfortunately today, you don't see that as much. It's more of a show out than a shout out to Mom. Oh, for the good old days, right? You see, my coach in football used to say to us, he said to us, when you get in the end zone, don't show out, but rather act like you've been there before. Pretty good advice, don't you think? But not so today. Today it's more show out than shout out. So we will take the time. We'll take the time to shout out again and say to the moms of the world, Happy Mom's Day. And if anything, my friend, this episode will remind you, most of you I hope, of how good and loving your own mother was and is to you. Now there are exceptions, and unfortunately, in our episode today, we're going to highlight 2 exceptions. However, before we do that, let's briefly take time to share our Crazy Crook story of the day. We always lighten the load with a Crazy Crook story. Well, this is a burglar that got rather dozy. And yep, get this, he got caught. But where he got caught is very interesting. He got caught snoozing in a hammock in his victim's backyard. And he told police while he was off his head tripping during a drug-addled crime spree. Sean Davis, well, he admitted to burglaring 3 sheds at a property there in South Wales. That was back on September the 21st, while carrying a knife and, quote-unquote, was off his head on speed. When asked by police if he was responsible for the burglary, the 27-year-old replied, I couldn't tell you. I was off my head tripping. Well, the court heard how Yvonne Flower walked downstairs to her kitchen around 8:30 a.m., noticed that the garden furniture had been moved. And the prosecutor, Stuart Melise, said, then she spotted the defendant from Meadow Street, asleep in a hammock in her backyard. Well, Miss Fowler, she called the police, who removed a knife between Davis' legs and asked him if he knew where he was. Well, he told the officers he was in another city about 15 miles away. Police did note that his pupils were dilated, his body was jerking. That was before finding 2 grams of amphetamine in his trouser pocket, which he said was of his personal use. Well, the court went on to hear how he damaged a window, broke a padlock, leaving items from the shed strewn all around the backyard and garden. Mr. McLeese said he apologized to the homeowner. He said that as he was removed. In an interview with officers, he told them, I was off my head. I didn't know what I was doing. When asked if he was carrying the knife for a particular reason, his reply, God only knows. Well, in a victim impact statement, Ms. Fowler said she had been unsettled by the incident. She went on to say this person has no respect for other people's feelings or property. And the court? Well, the court also heard, now hang on to your hat, Davis, who was sleeping in the hammock, had 29 convictions for, wait for it, 112 offenses, including burglaries, and was released from his last sentence a month before the incident. Now, Ruth Smith, the defender, told court her client had been diagnosed with attention deficit, had problems with drug dependency, and she said that her client, would like to write a letter of apology to the victim and offer to work in her garden for free. Sure. You and I would want to have a thief working around our yard, right? Yeah, sure. Well, my friend, our crazy crook this week was so high, that he just decided to take a moment in the midst of his crime to take a nap in a hammock. And that, my friend, this sleeping crook, sleeping in the hammock, is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Well, now back to our main focus, Lori Vallow and Casey Anthony. Why is Casey Anthony the most hated, even though she was tied to only one murder, her child, when Lori was tied to 4 murders, including her 2 children? Well, there are just so many similarities. Well, to begin with, both Lori and Casey have been described as quote-unquote loving parents. Both of them were described as that at one time in their trials. People actually testified under oath that each of them had been loving, caring parents until something happened, and then they were no longer caring, loving parents. Now, both are accused of killing their own children. And you may now wonder to yourself, well, how many children are actually killed by their own mothers? You see, it's really difficult to get an exact number of how many are killed by their own moms, but it is clearer to get a number of parents who kill. In fact, unfortunately, it happens so often there's even a term for it. And on the average, according to FBI statistics, 450 children are murdered by their parents each year in the United States. And get this, 71% of children killed by one parent, killed by their mothers. I don't know about you, but that's alarming to me. There's even a term for it, as I said earlier, filicide. Filicide is the deliberate act of a parent killing their own child. Now that word filicide is derived from two Latin words, filicus and filia, son and daughter, and the suffix, of course, side, filicide, meaning to kill, murder, or cause death. Now, you and I both know that parents sometimes kid around with their children. I've heard things said like, hey, I brought you into this world and I can take you out of the world. Kidding, of course. Unfortunately, there are some that are not kidding about that fact. So while Casey is still the most hated, well, both Lori and Casey, they both were implicit in the deaths of their own children. Now, there's another similarity, and that was that there were missing kids in the case. In other words, people were looking for missing kids. In both instances, they were looking for these children. Here in Central Florida, well, I got to tell you, people literally from all over the world came here to Central Florida to help look for little Kaylee Anthony. EquiSearch was here. Other search teams went all over the area, searching woods, swamps, anywhere they could look for precious little Kaylee. And the media, it was used to get the word out in both these cases. See pictures of these children that were missing? Well, they were seen around the world. The public was asked to help find these precious children. And these cases are also similar in the fact that there was some time between the time they were missing and the time they were perceived missing by others. In fact, there's been a whole lot said about the 31 days that was gone before Cindy, Casey's mom, reported the little girl, Kaylee, missing. And it is a fact, and somewhat eerie, that Lori's children were last seen, Lori Vallow, her children were last seen in September 2019, but reported missing all the way in November 2019. Again, approximately 1 month was gone before they reported missing. Very similar, don't you think? Yet, Casey Anthony is still the most hated of them. Another similarity. Both Casey and Lori lied about where the children were. Casey Anthony told police that little Kaylee was with her babysitter, Zenaida the nanny. That Zenaida the nanny had taken her. While Lori, well, she told police that little JJ was with Melanie Gibb, one of her friends, in another state. Both those stories were lies. Both of them lied. Yet Casey is still the most hated. And here's another one. I call it a biggie in my book. Both the moms, both Lori and Casey, well, they carried on with their lives as if nothing at all had happened. In fact, seemed to be enjoying their lives without their children. Now, most of us would be devastated if anything happened to our children, would we not? As a police officer, well, I too often, my friend, had to deliver bad news to a parent about them losing their own children, and I watched as their whole world crumbled around them of that horrific news. But these two, quite different. Casey Anthony, well, she danced and partied and went to the bars throughout the 30 days that her child was missing, and no one knew about it. Partied at bars as though she had not a care in the world while little Kaylee was missing. And Lori, well, she flew to Hawaii to celebrate life with her new husband. She danced on the beach One danced in the bars, another one danced on the beach. All the same time, their children were not only missing, but dead. Both of them partied and danced, yet Casey is still the one most hated. Why is that? And here's another similarity. Both of these cases, both of them were brought to light by grandparents. That's right, by grandparents, who can never forget that chilling phone call from Casey's mom, Cindy.
Okay, what is your now? Okay, what is the address that you're calling from? We're talking about a 3-year-old little girl. My daughter finally admitted that the baby's in the store. I need to find her. Your daughter admitted that the baby is where? The babysitter took her months ago that my daughter's been looking for. I told you my daughter was missing for a month. I just found her today, but I can't find my granddaughter. She just admitted to me that she's been trying to find her herself. There's something wrong. I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a dead body in the damn car. Okay, what is the 3-year-old's name? Kaylee. Caylee. Anthony. Kaylee Anthony? Yeah.
That, my friend, was Cindy Anthony calling about her granddaughter. There was another call from another grandmother. This grandmother concerned about her brother and about little JJ. This was Kay Woodcock's.
12 hours, Detective Moffitt calling Kay Woodcock in regards to case number 19-83744. Detective Moffitt with the Chandler Police Department returning your call.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well.
Well, Charles Vallow is my brother.
Okay.
Was my brother, and I don't even know where to start with all this, because this is crazy. We're blown away, and the only way we found out what happened was my husband just happened to Google Charles Vallow, Chandler, Arizona, and all these articles showed up. That's how we found out he got killed.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
And Lori never called us. She texted his 2 oldest sons, told him that I'm sorry, your dad's passed away. He loved y'all, and I love y'all too, and I'm at the funeral home making arrangements. That's it.
Okay.
She said, okay, so I don't, and she still hasn't talked to me. So, I mean, we just don't understand this. I know that there was issue with Al, the brother, Charles. There's a lot of stuff into this, okay?
Okay.
Now, both of these grandparents, Kay and her husband, would go on to explain to the police that little JJ was missing. So in both of these situations, both Casey Anthony and in Tylee Ryan and little JJ Vallow, the police were actually turned on to the case by grandparents, both of them. Yet Casey is the most hated. Now here's another similarity. Both of them were arrested for crimes other than murder, yep. And both of them were tied to theft of money. Casey was arrested, and she had stolen money both from her mom and her friend. But all of this was in the midst of these horrible murders, and the arrests were no doubt made to hold them while they could investigate the possible murders. Lori was also, again, convicted of theft, tied to using money that did not belong to her. Both were involved with financial crimes on top of the murder accusations, both of them. Yet Casey is still the most hated mom in America. Now, in the midst of this crazy crime stories of both of them also were distracted by a man. Yep, they had their eyes on another person other than their own children. Casey had her own boyfriend. You see, after Casey Anthony was arrested on child neglect charges and the disappearance of 2-year-old daughter Kaylee, well, she seemed more concerned about getting in touch with her boyfriend, Tony Lazzaro, than she was about the whereabouts of her little girl. He even testified in her trial. His name was Tony Lazzaro, and he told about how Casey came over with a book and a teddy bear with little Kaylee, and how Casey was a good mother. She and he were definitely an item. And we all know now from the trial that Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow were madly in love with each other, even though they were married to their own spouses. Charles Vallow and Tammy Daybell, who were both, by the way, murdered, and these people are tied to it. You may recall some of the steamy text that was read during the trial between Chad and Lori. Yep, both of them. Both of them were definitely distracted by a man. A man was more important than their kids. Both of them. Yet Casey somehow remains the most hated of the two. Another similarity, both of their trials was reported nation and worldwide. And, get this, both trials lasted a little over a month. And the jury's verdict, well, they were actually in. They deliberated less than 24 hours in both the trials. Casey Anthony's trial, her jury took 10 hours and 40 minutes. Lori's jury, well, they deliberated approximately 6 to 7 hours. Both of them less than 24 hours before they came with a verdict. Not very long, consider how long the trials were, right? Next, remember that both of them used the SOD defense. SOD, that's right, S-O-D. We use that in police terminology. We call it some other dude did it. Yep. You see, Casey's attorney, she tried to point the jury to Casey's own father. And also, he tried to point it to the meter man. While Lori's defense attorney, well, he tried to place all the blame on Chad Daybell, her new fifth husband. Yep, it's called the sod defense. Some other dude did it. Both of them used that same type of defense. Both of them. Yet Casey still seems to be the most hated. But that's where the similarities actually end, doesn't it? Lori, she was convicted. She was actually convicted of the murders of her children and 2 other people. Casey, well, she was acquitted. Lori was convicted, the murder of her children. Casey was acquitted, the mother of her child. Lori spending the rest of her life in prison, yet Casey is being set free. So I guess the question is this. What do you think, my friend? Is this the reason Casey is the most hated? She was only tied to 1 murder. Lori was tied to 2 murders, plus Tammy's murder, and will be tied to Charles's murder. Is it because she is the one that got away? Is that the reason America seems much more fascinated with hatred toward Casey Anthony than Lori Vallow? Oh, neither of them are loved, I can assure you that, but you can over and over and over again read how Casey Anthony is the most hated mom in America. And I would say that it's because she got away with it, except for the fact that she was known as the most hated mom even before the trial began. That's right. Before the trial began, we began to hear how she was the most hated mom in America. Why is it that Lori Vallow tied to the murder of 2 children and 2 others, while Casey is only tied to 1 death, and yet Casey remains the most hated? Hey, you tell me. I'd love to hear your answers. I really would. You can email me. You can email me, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's right, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Or, my friend, you can go to our Facebook page, Charlie Crimebuster on Facebook. You can even post your answer there. We asked the question there, why is it that Casey is still the most hated woman in America? Yep, I look forward to hearing from you. there's got to be a lot of people thinking a lot of different things about that. Some of you may even disagree with that. But I think you'll find, by far, Casey is the most hated. Hey, by the way, before we leave, let me take a moment to update you on the charges still to come from this case. You see, Lori may still face trial in another state for the murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. Remember, he was shot in her home by her brother, who I call Lori's spiritual hitman. We've even done a couple podcasts on that. If you'd like to get caught up on those, go to charliecrimebuster.com, charliecrimebuster.com, or peacemakernetwork.com. You can find all of our episodes there, or just Google it. You'll find episodes. Follow that up, and you can run down Alex Cox, Lori's spiritual hitman. Well, Charles was killed in her own home by her own brother. He claimed self-defense. Police now are saying, nope, don't think so. See, it was 45 minutes before 911 was even called. And now evidence says that he was even shot while he was lying on the floor. So they said, nope, it's murder. And she's going to be charged with that murder. Well, she's already charged with the murder. She's going to be tried for it. Will they do the trial? Will they plead it out? We don't know, but that's yet to come in another state. Now, remember, she was able to avoid the death penalty in this case, but will she be able to avoid it in the next one? In all probability, I think, yep, she'll probably avoid the death penalty in that one as well. You see, this one had much more focus on the death of the children. The other one will be focused on the death of her husband. That would be more easily to think about the death penalty with killing two innocent children than killing a husband. Well, it was taken off the table for this one anyhow. She did not get charged. She will spend her life in prison, in my opinion. Now, there's something else about the case I should tell you about. That sentencing has not yet taken place. It's probably going to take over a month. Judge said over a month. You see, they got to get the sentencing report in, read all about her, do all those studies, those studies that the social workers do to get it all together for the judge before he can make his decision. But I will guarantee you, that's what we say, guarantee, right? I'll guarantee you that she will get prison for the rest of her life without the possibility of parole. She deserves that and more in my book. Well, there's another update about Chad Daybell, her new husband. You see, he's going to be tried for all of these as well. And his trial is scheduled for the summer of 2024. That's over a year away. Some people are saying, why is it taking so long? Well, one of the reasons is the death penalty. Well, it is on the table on this one. Yep, he could be sentenced to death. There's a high probability that he will be sentenced to death if convicted in the trial. So you also have to prepare to defend your client, not only from the charges of murder, but you also have to prepare to defend your client from the death penalty. Takes more time to prepare. So that's going to be over a year away, summer of 2024, according to authorities right now. Now we're going to keep you updated on Chad Daybell and the sentencing of Lori. But before we leave today, I also have got to take the time to remind all of us that the real people here are the victims. The young children who did not grow up, the two spouses who did not deserve to die so young and the way that they had to die. I'm talking about Charles Vallow, Tylee Ryan, J.J. Vallow, Tammy Daybell. May they all rest in peace. Also, let me remind you, if you know of any instance where children may be abused or in danger, please say something about it. You can call the Child Abuse Hotline, 1-800-962-2873, 1-800-962-2873. Time is of essence. And I have also a message to law enforcement. I know I've been there. We hear accusations all the time, many of them unfounded. It's easy to look the other way or to think, well, there's really nothing here. But if police in the Lori Vallow case at least had dug a little deeper when Charles Vallow was shot, well, they could have maybe stopped the killing of 3 other people, including 2 precious children. So to my brothers and sisters in law enforcement, please take every case and accusation seriously. Investigate fully. Dig a little deeper. You never know when your investigations may save lives. And to all of you out there in Charlie Crimebuster Land, let me say to you, as I say every week, please, my friends, stay alert, stay safe. For the life you save, yep, it may be your very own.